The gavel hadn't even touched the bench when the courtroom doors slammed open, hard enough to rattle the cameras. A young man in an expensive jacket strutted inside, chin high, badge necklace flashing like a threat. He didn't wait to be addressed, didn't even slow down. "I'm not here to be judged," he announced, pointing at the bench. "I am the law in this town. My father is the chief. You don't get to touch me." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Bailiffs glanced toward Judge Judy, unsure if they should step in or brace for impact. But she never blinked. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Son, you just walked into the wrong courtroom." The tension coiled, electric and dangerous, because no one yet knew the real reason he was there, or the historic punishment waiting for him on the other side of the truth. The echo of his boots still throbbed through the courtroom when Judge Judy lifted her gaze, not in surprise but in measured irritation. The cameras hadn't even settled their focus before Caleb Mercer stopped in the center of the aisle, daring the room to breathe. The tension arrived with him, sharp, restless, almost metallic in the air. Caleb's expensive jacket caught the overhead lights, each reflection a small act of defiance. The badge necklace around his neck swung like a pendulum of privilege, drawing every eye whether they wanted to look or not. He didn't sit, didn't wait, just stood there, chest forward, posture crafted to mimic authority instead of earning it. Luis Ortega, the quiet store owner seated at the plaintiff's table, lowered his eyes as Caleb passed him. Not in fear, in something heavier, disappointment. The kind that sinks into a person who has seen arrogance before and knows what it can cost. A few spectators shifted uncomfortably. One of the bailiffs subtly stepped closer to the bench, reading the room the way seasoned officers do when ego enters with its own gravitational pull. Caleb finally stopped walking, planted himself, and spoke as if delivering a decree rather than a defense. "I'm not here to be judged," he declared, voice ringing with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. He lifted a finger toward the bench, a gesture that made even the cameras hesitate. "I am the law in this town. My father is the chief. You don't get to touch me." The words landed like a physical shove, a few gasps, a murmured, "Oh my God," from the audience, a low whistle from somewhere near the back. But Judy didn't move. Her stillness became the new center of gravity in the room, quiet but crushing. When she spoke, her voice didn't rise. It sharpened. "Son," she said, each syllable a clean cut in the charged silence, "you just walked into the wrong courtroom." Caleb smirked, mistaking her restraint for weakness. He leaned one arm on the rail near the plaintiff's table, posture loose, casual, dismissive. "You can't intimidate me," he added, shrugging. "People in this town know who I am." Judy watched him with an expression so calm it felt like a warning he was too arrogant to hear. Luis shifted in his seat, hands trembling over the folder he brought, a folder that held the complaint Caleb pretended didn't exist. From the corner of the room, Maya, the teenage witness, watched silently, her phone clutched to her chest, hiding the recording that would soon rewrite everything Caleb believed about untouchable power. Judy tapped her gavel once, not striking, just calling the room back from shock. "Mr. Mercer," she said slowly, "why don't you start by explaining why you barged into my courtroom before you were called?" Caleb's smirk faltered, barely, but enough for the room to feel it. Judy leaned forward ever so slightly and added, "Let's start with why you ran here in the first place." The file didn't slam onto the bench. It arrived with a soft, deliberate thud. But somehow, that quiet sound hit Caleb harder than any gavel ever could. Even his smirk paused, hanging awkwardly in the air like a lie losing strength. Judge Judy opened the manila folder slowly, as if granting the room a moment to brace itself. The pages inside rustled with a sound that felt strangely heavy, like whispered truths finally stepping into the light. Caleb shifted his weight, rolling his shoulders back in a show of confidence, yet his fingers tapped against his thigh. A restless rhythm. A tell. Judy didn't look at him yet. She read, and the silence grew sharper by the second. Finally, she lifted her eyes. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "this is the formal complaint filed against you by Mr. Ortega." Luis Ortega, sitting at the plaintiff's table, straightened only slightly. His face held that restrained ache of someone who wanted peace, not spectacle. His hands remained folded, knuckles pale, a man trying to keep his dignity intact. Caleb gave a breathless laugh, forced and brittle. "That?" he waved dismissively. "This guy's been after me for weeks. He probably made something up to get attention. People like him always do." Luis flinched but didn't speak. Judy, however, lifted a brow. "People like him?" A pause that pulled the room taut. "Explain that." Caleb shrugged, over-smiling. "Too big, too bright. You know, jealous small-town types. They see someone with influence and they start inventing problems. I wasn't anywhere near his shop." A few spectators exchanged glances. That smile wasn't confidence. It was camouflage. Judy flipped the page. The microphone captured the soft sound, "Pft," and it seemed to drain the color from Caleb's face. "According to this statement," Judy read, "you entered Mr. Ortega's store after hours, demanded free merchandise, and when refused, vandalized property." Caleb scoffed loudly. "Lies, all lies." But then Judy read the next line, her voice measured and cool. "Mr. Ortega reported you threatened him, saying, and I quote, 'I run this town. You're lucky I let you stay open.'" A low, unsettled murmur drifted through the audience. Luis finally looked up. His eyes shimmered, not with anger, but with the exhaustion of someone who has carried fear quietly for far too long. "I didn't want this," he said softly. "I just wanted it to stop." That quiet honesty hit the room harder than Caleb's arrogance ever had. Judy studied Caleb, noticing the slight twitch at the corner of his jaw, a crack forming in the smooth facade. He looked away when she turned the page again, his gaze darting toward the camera lights as if hoping they'd shift attention elsewhere. They didn't. "Mr. Mercer," Judy continued, "this next part, your father won't like." Caleb's smirk vanished completely. Judy closed the folder halfway, eyes narrowing. "Let's discuss the incident your father tried to warn us about." The courtroom didn't breathe when Judge Judy lifted the confidential note. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Just the sight of that folded paper was enough to drain the color from Caleb's face. Judy unfolded it slowly, the paper crackling like brittle ice. Caleb watched it open with the dread of someone recognizing the shape of a truth he hoped would never see daylight. "This," Judy said, tapping the corner of the page, "is a written statement from your father, Chief Mercer." A ripple went through the room. The chief's name carried weight, authority, legacy, the kind of law enforcement presence that shaped the tone of a town. But this had a different gravity. Caleb straightened, then slouched, then straightened again, posture flickering between arrogance and fear. The badge necklace on his chest suddenly looked less like a symbol and more like a chain. Judy read aloud, "I request that the court treat my son not as the police chief's child, but as any citizen accountable for actions taken. Do not grant him leniency on my behalf." Caleb blinked, confused, angry, wounded. That's not real," he muttered. "He would never send something like that." Luis Ortega watched quietly, hands gripping the wooden edge of the plaintiff's table. He didn't look triumphant. He looked heartbroken, like a man seeing yet another life twisted by pride. Judy continued, "There's more." She flipped to the next line. Caleb leaned forward, hoping, praying, for a sentence that would erase the last one. Instead, she read, "I fear my son's pattern of behavior is escalating. Officers have reported increasing volatility." The courtroom reacted with a staggered gasp. Even the cameras seemed to refocus, zooming ever so slightly, as if pulled in by the gravity of revelation. Caleb shook his head, stumbling over his words. He doesn't mean that. Look, he's under stress. He's dealing with a lot. You can't just take... Mr. Mercer. Judy's interruption was gentle, but it held the force of a verdict. When a father writes something like this, it's not to hurt you. It's to stop you from hurting yourself or someone else. Caleb's jaw clenched. His eyes darted to the door, almost expecting his father to burst through and retract everything, shield him, restore the narrative where Caleb ruled the town by proxy. But the door remained closed. Luis spoke softly, his voice trembling. "Judge, the officers who came to my shop looked scared, like they had seen this before. Caleb whipped toward him. Scared of me. Please, they respect me. No. Judy's voice cut cleanly through the rising heat. They're afraid of what you're becoming. Silence fell again, a heavy, suffocating quiet. Judy lowered the statement and pinned Caleb with a gaze that peeled away every remaining layer of pretense. So, Mr. Mercer, this isn't your first outburst of power. She leaned in, gaze unwavering. Is it? Caleb swallowed hard, the first visible sign that the foundation beneath him was beginning to crack. Judy sets the statement aside and says, Then let's talk about the incident you swore never happened. Caleb's denial came fast, too fast, so fast it felt rehearsed, and the speed of it was the first crack that made the entire courtroom lean forward. I wasn't anywhere near that shop, he snapped, voice ricocheting off the wood paneling. All of this is made up. You're wasting everyone's time. Judge Judy didn't respond right away. She just stared. A long, unnerving stare, the kind that didn't accuse, didn't argue, simply waited. Waiting in her courtroom was always a trap. Caleb shifted under that silence, jaw tightening, fingers drumming on the table. A quiet, frantic rhythm that betrayed the storm beneath his carefully designed arrogance. Luis Ortega didn't speak. He sat with the patience of someone who had been holding his truth for a long time, long enough to know it didn't need volume to matter. Judy finally exhaled, a slow, measured release of air. Mr. Mercer, she said, denial is not a defense, it's a delay. Caleb scoffed, but the sound cracked at the end. A hairline fracture in confidence. Let's be clear, Judy continued, voice steady as stone. You claim you were nowhere near Mr. Ortega's shop that evening? I already said that, Caleb burst out. Do you not listen? Judy didn't flinch. She merely lifted a hand, and the bailiff opened the side door. A girl stepped in. Young, nervous, determined. Maya, her phone gripped in one hand, her backpack strap clutched in the other. She looked around the courtroom the way someone looks into cold water right before jumping. Maya, Judy said gently, you told officers you had something the court should see. Caleb turned pale. He recognized her. More importantly, he recognized the phone. That's not necessary, he blurted out. She's confused. She doesn't... Maya, Judy said, ignoring him. Were you near Mr. Ortega's store the night of the incident? Yes, Your Honor. Did you see Mr. Mercer there? A beat, then two. Even the lights seemed to hum louder. Yes, Maya whispered. I recorded it. Gasps broke like a wave across the courtroom. Luis covered his mouth, tears swelling. Caleb froze, not in fear, but in calculation, his mind sprinting for a way out. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped at her. That video is fake, edited. You're just some kid looking for... Mr. Mercer. Judy's tone cut through him like a razor of calm. If the footage is falsified, this will be very easy to prove. Her fingers drummed once on the bench, a subtle echo of Caleb's own nervous rhythm, a mirror, a warning. Then she nodded to the bailiff. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen on the wall flickered to life. Caleb's breath caught. The room leaned forward. Maya closed her eyes. On the screen, a figure appeared, Caleb himself, shouting, kicking the store's sign, hurling threats, the badge necklace gleaming under streetlights. Unmistakable, unedited, undeniable. Judy's voice was barely above a whisper as she said, Let's watch what you don't want us to see. The video froze on Caleb's face, mid-shout, mid-rage, mid-lie, and the still image was louder than any sound in the room. His own expression had become evidence, and for the first time, Caleb didn't seem to recognize the man he was pretending not to be. A cold hush settled over the courtroom, the kind that makes every heartbeat feel intrusive. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above, carving hard shadows across Caleb's face as he stared at the frozen frame. He swallowed. Hard. The movement looked painful. Judy didn't speak. She let the silence tighten like a slow, inexorable knot around him, the kind that exposed character faster than accusation ever could. Caleb cleared his throat. It's edited, he said, voice cracking at the edges. Kids do that all the time. You can, I don't know, deep fake anything now. The words came too fast, tripping over each other, revealing panic before logic. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, the badge necklace resting crooked against his collar, no longer the centerpiece of his confidence. Maya stood small but steady. That's exactly how it happened, she whispered, clutching her phone like a truth she wished she didn't have to carry. Luis looked at Caleb with a heartbreaking blend of fear and empathy, a man who never wanted to destroy anyone, only to stop the harm aimed at him. Caleb snapped toward him. "What are you looking at? You think this makes you right? This doesn't prove anything." But Judy raised a hand and he stopped mid-tirade. Her calm was lethal. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "your timeline claims you were at home the entire evening. This footage disagrees." Caleb's eyes darted to the nearest camera, as if hoping it would cut away, spare him, rewrite reality. But every lens held steady, unblinking, recording the collapse in real time. "That's not me," he insisted, but the words trembled. "You're all seeing what you want to see." "Then why?" Judy asked softly. "Did you run into my courtroom before being summoned?" Caleb froze. A muscle jumped in his jaw, the truth flinching inside him. He tried to mask it with a laugh, but the sound cracked down the middle like broken glass. "I didn't run. I simply—" "No," Judy interrupted, leaning forward with the precision of someone tightening the final screw. "You ran. You barged in before your case was even called. Why?" Caleb's mouth opened. No sound, just breath, shallow, uneven. The mask slipped further. His posture sagged, eyes darted, hands restless, words elusive. A boy, not a badge. A fear, not a threat. Luis whispered, barely audible. He knew. Caleb snapped toward him, eyes wild, confirmation in the panic. Judy didn't miss it. She tapped the threatening message printouts once, the papers whispering like ghosts of the truth. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "let's talk about why you really rushed to this courtroom." Caleb opened his mouth to deny everything, but no words emerged, only a trembling breath, and the courtroom felt that hesitation like the first crack before a dam gives way. Judge Judy watched him carefully, her expression carved from a stillness that revealed more truth than any outburst could. Silence stretched between them, not empty but heavy, like it had weight, like it was pressing the truth out of him grain by grain. Caleb finally spoke. Barely. "I heard something," he muttered, eyes darting downward. "Rumors, just rumors." "Rumors," Judy repeated, her tone a measured echo. "What kind of rumors make a man storm into a courtroom before he's even called?" Caleb's throat bobbed, his fingers tapped again, faster this time, frantic, a tell he no longer had control over. Luis Ortega shifted beside his small, worn folder. But it wasn't the folder that caught Judy's attention. It was the plain white envelope clutched beneath Luis's palm. The edges were bent, as though the envelope had been gripped too tightly, too often. There was something inside it, something Luis hadn't dared reveal yet. "Mr. Ortega," Judy said gently, "I assume that envelope is related?" Luis hesitated, then nodded. It's what made me file the complaint. I thought I should give it directly to you." Caleb stiffened. Even before the envelope was opened, his breathing changed, shallow, faster, chest rising in uneven waves. Luis stood and walked it to the bench. The courtroom watched in a tension-filled slow motion. The sound of paper sliding across the wood echoed like a whisper of consequence. Judy opened the envelope. Inside were printed screenshots, messages sent from an anonymous number, short, threatening, cruel. "You don't say no to me. I can shut your life down. Remember who runs this town." Caleb's face drained of color. Judy held up the sheets. "Mr. Mercer, these messages were sent the night before the incident. According to digital forensics, the number traces back to a phone registered under your name." Caleb shook his head violently. No, that's not. You can't prove I wrote that. Someone spoofed my—" "Stop!" Judy's voice flattened to quiet authority. "Look at the language, the phrasing, the cadence. It matches your previous complaints word for word." His mouth opened, closed, opened again, nothing. Just the sound of someone losing grip on their own narrative. Maya watched him, fear flickering behind her eyes. Luis looked at the ground as if he didn't want to see a man unravel. Judy didn't look away. She didn't blink. "Mr. Mercer," she said, raising the printed threats, "you wrote these, didn't you?" Caleb's breathing shuddered, the final tell. Judy leaned slightly forward, her voice soft but lethal. Tell this courtroom why you felt the need to threaten a man and a judge. If you were sitting in that courtroom, what would you do? Stay silent or speak up? Caleb tried to fire back, to deny, to shout, to reclaim the room, but his voice snagged on something inside him. The first word tripped, the second never arrived. And the silence that followed revealed more than any confession. His chest rose sharply, like each breath fought against itself. The printed threats shook in Judge Judy's hand, not from her, but from the air around them, thick with tension and unraveling pride. "Mr. Mercer," Judy said, her tone level, "answer the question." Caleb blinked rapidly, searching for the performance he always relied on, but the room wasn't a stage anymore. It was a mirror. I don't remember sending those," he managed, voice thin. "That could be anyone. You can't say it's the syntax is identical to your prior internal complaints," Judy cut in. "Same phrasing, same rhythm, same arrogance." A flicker crossed his face, recognition and fear colliding. Maya stepped closer to the witness stand, clutching her phone with both hands. Her voice was soft, but steady enough to shift the room's gravity. "He told kids at school he could shut down any judge who crossed him," she whispered. He said being the chief's son made him untouchable." Caleb turned on her, desperation sharpening his words. "You're lying. You're making this worse for yourself. You think anyone will believe." But his words buckled mid-sentence. The fury that once defined him now sounded like a frightened echo of itself. Luis Ortega lifted his gaze at last. There was no hatred in his expression, only the exhaustion of someone forced to endure the chaos of another man's unchecked ego. "Why are you so angry at everyone?" Luis asked quietly. "You're not fighting us. You're fighting something inside yourself." Caleb recoiled, as if the words touched a nerve deeper than accusation. Judy leaned back slightly, studying him the way a surgeon studies a wound before cutting deeper. "Your father's statement described escalating volatility," she said. "Do you know what that means, Mr. Mercer?" Caleb looked toward the doors again. Not with confidence, with longing. As if hoping the chief might appear and pull him out of the truth closing in on him. But the doorway stayed empty. And for the first time, his shoulders sagged. The badge necklace on his chest no longer shone like armor. It hung crooked, heavy, dragging him downward. "Is that why you threatened Mr. Ortega?" Judy asked. "To feel powerful, to feel seen?" Caleb squeezed his eyes shut. A tremor ran through him, fear slipping out from behind fury's mask. "That's not," his voice cracked. "That's not what I meant." "But it's what you did," Judy responded softly. The room exhaled as one, a collective recognition that the boy behind the arrogance was finally slipping through the cracks. Judy folded her hands and said, "Mr. Mercer, is that also why you threatened me this morning?" For the first time since he barged in, Caleb Mercer looked small. Not because anyone diminished him, but because the truth finally stood taller than he did. The lights above buzzed faintly, washing the courtroom in a cold, white clarity. Caleb sat rigid, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles blanched. The badge necklace, once his shield, now hung against his chest like a verdict. Judge Judy didn't speak right away. She let the silence work. Silence was where truth grew teeth. "Mr. Mercer," she finally said, her voice a controlled whisper, "you threatened a man, and you threatened this court. Explain why." Caleb's lips parted, but no sound came. Only a thin exhale, brittle, defeated. Maya watched him with wide, steady eyes. Luis bowed his head, praying for strength or mercy or simply for this to end before anyone else broke. When Caleb finally spoke, the words scraped out of him. "I didn't mean I was angry. I just said things. People say things." "Not threats," Judy said sharply. "Not promises of harm. Not declarations of power you never had." A flush rose under Caleb's skin. Shame, resentment, and something rawer beneath it. One of the bailiffs shifted subtly, the movement speaking louder than any sentence. They weren't preparing to protect Caleb anymore. They were preparing to protect the court from him. A symbolic shift. Authority changing hands. Judy tapped the bench lightly, just once, but the sound reverberated like a warning shot. You claimed you run this town. You claimed no judge could touch you. That is not arrogance, Mr. Mercer. That is delusion." Caleb winced, as if the words struck him physically. The audience murmured, a soft, rising wave of disbelief and anger. Even the cameras zoomed in instinctively, capturing the unraveling of a boy who had mistaken inherited power for personal worth. Luis's voice wavered as he spoke. "I didn't file this to ruin you. I just needed you to stop." The sincerity in his tone filled the courtroom with a quiet ache. Caleb swallowed hard. His eyes flicked again toward the side doors, that hopeless longing for his father's rescue tightening every breath he took. Judy noticed, and she leaned in. "You keep looking at that door," she said, "expecting someone to save you, but Mr. Mercer, the person you're waiting for, might not be coming in to defend you." Caleb's eyes snapped to her, confusion tightening into dread. Judy folded her hands, gaze unwavering. "Before this hearing, I requested additional security, because of a threat made to a court official." She paused, letting the meaning settle. "Your father responded to that request." Caleb frowned. He's here?" Judy's expression didn't shift, but the air in the courtroom changed, sharper, colder, heavier. "Caleb," she said softly, "your father did show up, just not for the reason you think. The side door didn't swing open. It creaked, slow and heavy, like the truth had to push its way inside. And when Chief Mercer stepped through, the entire courtroom seemed to exhale in disbelief. He wasn't in uniform, no badge, no gun belt, just a plain dark jacket and the posture of a man carrying consequences he could no longer avoid protecting. Caleb shot to his feet. "Dad, finally! Tell them this is insane!" But the chief didn't lift his eyes to him. That single refusal, that gravity of silence, cracked something raw inside Caleb's voice. "Dad?" Quieter, frightened. The chief walked forward with slow, deliberate steps, each one echoing through the courtroom with the weight of a man who had rehearsed this moment alone, in the dark, knowing it would break his son to save him. Judge Judy spoke softly. "Chief Mercer, you submitted a written statement. Are you here to affirm it?" The chief placed a sealed envelope on the bench. "I'm here," he said, voice low but steady, "to tell the truth in person." Caleb blinked rapidly, breathing uneven. "What truth? What are you—" The chief finally looked at him, and it wasn't anger in his eyes. It was heartbreak. "Son," he said, voice strained, "I have covered for you more times than I should have. I thought I was protecting you. I was wrong." Caleb staggered backward as if shoved. No, you don't mean that. You wouldn't betray me like this." "This isn't betrayal," the chief whispered. "It's accountability." The audience shifted, murmuring softly, the kind of sound that vibrates through a room when something sacred and painful is unfolding. Judy opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten confession that trembled slightly from the weight of what it carried. She read aloud, "I request additional protection for Judge Judith Scheindlin. A threat was made to her this morning. My son was the source." Caleb's knees seemed to give for a moment, his hand flying to the edge of the table to steady himself. Dad, no. You can't say that. You know I didn't mean—" The chief closed his eyes, a single tear slipping down before he could stop it. "You told me," he said hoarsely, "that you would make her regret ever questioning you. You said it. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't defend you anymore." Maya covered her mouth, tears welling. Luis bowed his head, grief softening into empathy he never expected to feel. Caleb shook violently, not out of rage, but out of fear so raw it stripped him of every mask he had ever worn. "Dad, please, don't do this." The chief stepped back. "It's already done, son." Judy folded the statement with deliberate care, her expression unwavering. She looked Caleb in the eye and said, "Let's talk about who you've really been hurting." Caleb tried to speak, tried to build a sentence, a defense, any lifeline, but the words disintegrated before they reached his mouth. Sometimes the truth doesn't strike like lightning. Sometimes it cuts slowly, surgically, until a person has nothing left to hide behind. He stood frozen, eyes wide and shimmering in the harsh courtroom lights. The badge necklace he once wore like armor now slipped sideways across his chest, sliding lower with each trembling breath. Even gravity seemed tired of holding up his pride. Judge Judy rested her palms on the bench, not harshly but firmly, grounding the moment. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "you threatened this court. You threatened Mr. Ortega. And now, we learn you threatened your own father." Caleb shook his head rapidly, words spilling out in fragments. I was angry. I didn't mean." But intent was no longer the question. Impact was. Chief Mercer sat behind him, shoulders bowed, a posture that was itself a confession. The strongest man in the department now looked like someone mourning a son he couldn't reach. Luis Ortega watched Caleb with a kind of aching confusion. Not hatred, not vindication. Just the quiet sorrow of seeing another human break under the truth. Judy continued, her voice calm but piercing. "You said earlier you were the law in this town. Tell me, Mr. Mercer, what part of the law allows threats when you do not get what you want?" Caleb's breath hitched. His hands clenched the table so tightly the wood creaked. Maya came forward, standing a little straighter than before. "You scared everyone," she said quietly, "not because you were powerful, but because you were unpredictable." Caleb flinched, as if struck. Judy turned her gaze to him again. "Is that why you lashed out at Mr. Ortega? Because he didn't recognize your authority? Because he didn't see you the way you needed to be seen?" A tear slipped from the corner of Caleb's eye, the first. He didn't wipe it away. Maybe he didn't notice. Maybe he finally didn't have the energy to hide it. The chief whispered, voice hollow. "Son, when did you become so afraid of not being important?" Caleb swallowed hard, jaw quivering. "I wasn't afraid," he said, but the tremble in his voice betrayed him. If I didn't act like someone, then no one would look at me. No one would listen." He let out a breath he'd been holding for years. "I didn't want to be ordinary," he whispered. "I didn't want to disappear." The room softened, not in forgiveness, but in recognition of the wounded human beneath the wreckage. And Judy, she didn't look triumphant. She looked resolute. "Power," she said gently, "isn't a cure for fear. It's a magnifier." Caleb's shoulders shook, every part of him unraveling in slow, painful honesty. Judy leaned forward, eyes unblinking. "Mr. Mercer, what are you really afraid people will see when they look at you without the badge?" Caleb didn't answer at first. He stared at the polished table, as if the grain of the wood could save him, as if truth might hide in its lines. But truth wasn't hiding anymore. It was sitting beside him, breathing down his neck. A long, trembling exhale slipped from his mouth, one he didn't seem to realize he'd been holding. His shoulders sagged, the last scaffolding of arrogance collapsing under the weight of exposure. And when he finally lifted his face, it wasn't fury in his eyes. It was a terrified kind of nakedness. "I didn't want them to see me," he whispered. Judge Judy didn't speak. She let the words come the way they needed to, slow, reluctant, real. Caleb swallowed hard. "That night at the store, I wasn't trying to get free stuff. He shook his head, shame settling into the curve of his spine. "I wanted Mr. Ortega to know who I was, or who I thought I was." Luis blinked, stunned by the candor. Caleb's voice cracked on the next words. "I don't have friends, not really. I'm the chief's kid. People act scared of me, or try to use me. So I thought, if I acted big, if I acted powerful," he clenched his hands until his knuckles whitened, "maybe I'd matter." The quiet in the courtroom shifted, from tension to understanding. Not sympathy, but recognition. Even the wrongdoer has a story that led him into darkness. Maya lowered her phone, her expression softening despite everything he'd done. "You didn't have to scare people," she whispered. "You could have just been a person." Caleb let out a bitter, broken laugh. "I don't know how to be one. Not without the badge, not without my father's shadow. I thought if I wasn't important, I was nothing." Chief Mercer pressed a hand over his mouth, struggling to steady himself. He had raised a boy who mistook fear for respect, authority for identity, silence for admiration. A boy who thought power was the only language people listened to. Judge Judy leaned forward, her gaze piercing but not cruel. What you did, Mr. Mercer, was dangerous. It was cruel. But the part you're only admitting now is that it came from fear, not strength. Caleb nodded slowly, every movement steeped in exhaustion. I didn't threaten you because I wanted to hurt you. A shaky breath. I threatened you because you weren't afraid of me. Judy's expression shifted, barely, but enough. This was the emotional revelation the entire case had been circling, the core truth, the fracture at the heart of Caleb's spiral. You wanted your father to see you, she said quietly. You wanted this whole town to see you. She paused. But the person you hurt the most wasn't Mr. Ortega. Caleb looked up, confused. Then, who? Judy glanced toward the chief, the man sitting in the back row, breaking silently as his son unraveled. You hurt the man who believed in you longest, Judy said softly. Your father. The courtroom didn't move. Not a breath, not a whisper, not a shuffle of a single shoe. It was as if the room itself was holding Caleb up because he no longer could. Caleb sagged into his chair, every trace of defiance dissolved. His hair fell forward, shadowing his eyes, or hiding them. He wasn't a threat anymore. He wasn't even the arrogant son who had burst through the doors claiming he was the law. He looked like a boy who had just realized he was standing in the ruins of the person he pretended to be. Judge Judy allowed the quiet to settle, not as punishment, but as space. Space for truth to breathe. Space for consequence to take shape. Finally, she said, Mr. Mercer, look at your father. Slowly, painfully, Caleb lifted his eyes. Chief Mercer sat rigid, hands clasped together so tightly they trembled. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disappointed. He was devastated, the kind of devastation that has no volume, only silence. Caleb's voice cracked. I didn't mean to hurt him, Judy responded softly. Harm doesn't require intention, only impact. Luis Ortega inhaled sharply at those words, their truth hitting him as well. He understood that line more intimately than anyone in the room. Caleb rubbed his face, shoulders heaving. I thought he'd always catch me, fix it, make it go away, but he didn't, not this time. This time, Judy said, he realized covering for you wasn't love. It was destruction. The chief swallowed hard, a tear slipping free despite his attempts to restrain it. Son, he whispered, voice raw, I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was build a cage around you made of privilege and fear. Caleb closed his eyes, the words breaking him open. Judge Judy straightened, her authoritative calm returning with precision. Restitution must be handed down, not as revenge, but as rehabilitation. Caleb nodded, defeated. I'll take whatever punishment you give me, Your Honor. His tone wasn't dramatic. It was empty, stripped of the ego that once protected him. He wasn't bargaining. He wasn't posturing. He was finally facing himself. Luis stepped forward slightly. His voice shook, but his moral clarity did not. I don't want to destroy him, he said. I want him to learn. I want him to stop hurting people. That's all. Caleb looked at him, truly looked at him, as if seeing Luis for the first time as another human instead of an obstacle. I'm sorry, Caleb whispered, not eloquent, not persuasive, but real. Judy nodded once. Restitution, she repeated quietly, but not just monetary. You need a sentence that teaches accountability and humility. Caleb braced. Judy reached beneath the bench and lifted a separate document, one rarely used, heavy with significance. Mr. Mercer, she said, your punishment will be historic. Judge Judy laid the document on the bench with the kind of reverence usually reserved for final verdicts. Not loud, not dramatic, just deliberate, the sound of a life about to change. Caleb stared at the paper as if it might move on its own, as if the words printed on it could somehow rearrange themselves into something easier to survive. But the courtroom stayed still, solemn, expectant. Judy lifted the pages. This, she said, is a civil restitution and behavioral intervention order. It is rarely used, almost never televised. Her eyes locked onto Caleb's. But cases like yours require more than fines. A faint hum filled the room, the cameras adjusting, the audience leaning forward, the subtle tremor of anticipation. Caleb swallowed, throat tight. What? What does it mean? Judy inhaled slowly, choosing her words the way a surgeon chooses where to cut. You will spend 1 full year in a structured community restitution program, she said. Not sweeping floors, not answering phones. You will work directly with victims of nonviolent crimes, supervised by an independent civil board. Caleb's breath hitched. You want me to talk to them? No, Judy corrected. I want you to listen to them. The words landed with more force than any sentence he had imagined. Luis Ortega's eyes softened, not triumphant but hopeful, as if this was the one path that could actually prevent future pain. Caleb tried to speak but faltered. I don't know if I can do that. That, Judy replied calmly, is precisely why you must. The chief lowered his head, not in shame but in gratitude. For the first time, he looked like a father relieved that someone had finally found a way to reach his son. But Judy wasn't finished. She turned to the second page. You will also participate in a televised civic accountability forum. Not for humiliation, but for transparency. This town deserves to hear you acknowledge the harm you caused. Caleb closed his eyes, the reality of it settling in his bones. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't punishment for cameras. This was dismantling his entire identity and rebuilding it from the ground up. And lastly, Judy said, lifting the final sheet, your progress will be reviewed quarterly. If you show resistance, hostility, or attempts to leverage your father's position, you will be removed from the program and referred to legal authorities. A ripple of tension swept the room. The bailiffs shifted. Even Maya's phone wavered slightly as she filmed. Caleb exhaled shakily. Your Honor, I don't know who I am without the badge, Judy answered softly. That is exactly what this year will teach you. He pressed his hands together, trembling. Is there anything else? Judy set the remaining page down. Yes, she said. One more condition. You will not use your father's name, title, or influence in any capacity, not once, for the entire duration of your sentence. The words didn't explode. They didn't echo or thunder. They simply landed, quiet, precise, irreversible. And somehow that quiet hurt Caleb more than any shout ever could. Caleb's face went still. Completely still, as if the entire world had stopped moving around him and he was the only one left breathing in a reality he never imagined would exist. You want me to give up his name? He whispered. Judge Judy didn't blink. You will not use your father's authority, reputation, or badge as leverage, not once. Not in public, not in private, not in passing conversation, not even in a whisper. Caleb's hands fell from the table, limp at his sides. It wasn't defiance. It was the collapse of the last pillar holding up his identity. My father's name is all I ever had, he said, voice cracking. All my life. People only saw me because of him. And look, Judy replied gently, what that belief turned you into. Maya lowered her gaze. Luis exhaled, the kind that carried years of tension leaving the body. Even the chief swallowed hard, guilt tightening his jaw. Caleb ran a trembling hand over his face. I don't know how to be someone without being his son. Judy leaned forward, her tone steady, warm but unyielding. That is exactly why this condition exists, not to punish you, but to free you from a shadow you've mistaken for purpose. Those words cracked him deeper than any accusation. Caleb's voice shrank. What if I fail? The question echoed with the vulnerability of a child asking who he is when no one is clapping for him. It echoed with the fear of a man who had never stood on his own 2 feet without a badge to prop him up. The chief finally spoke, voice wrecked but honest. You won't fail if you try, son. You'll fail if you keep pretending you're something you're not. Caleb's breathing hitched. His shoulders shook once, then twice. He pressed his palm to the table as if it were the only solid thing left in his world. Luis stepped forward, gently, cautiously. I hope this helps you become someone better, he said quietly. There's a good person in you. I just want him to show up. Caleb swallowed hard, fighting the storm inside him. The courtroom watched a truth many had never seen, a man stripped of every illusion, standing alone with nothing but himself. The badge necklace glimmered faintly under the lights, a dying echo of his old identity. He unclasped it with shaking fingers, held it, looked at it, then set it on the table, and in that moment the sound of the metal touching wood was louder than thunder. Caleb lifted his eyes to Judy, voice quiet, wrecked, and real. "Your Honor, what happens to me now?" Before the verdict, think about this. Can a person truly change, or do they just learn to hide their worst parts better? The gavel hovered in the air, not as a weapon, not as a warning, but as a promise. A quiet promise that justice, when done right, doesn't come from anger. It comes from clarity. Judge Judy lowered her gavel slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle into the grain of the room. Caleb stood there, eyes red, shoulders slumped, hands trembling not from fear of punishment, but from finally understanding it. "Mr. Mercer," Judy said, her voice steady, "you asked what happens to you now." Caleb nodded once, barely. "What happens," she continued, "is not destruction, it is rebuilding." He blinked, stunned by the unexpected mercy woven into the firmness of her tone. "You will complete your 1-year community restitution program," Judy said. "You will meet victims, hear their stories, and understand the depth of the harm your choices caused." Caleb swallowed hard, nodding again. "You will comply with quarterly reviews," she went on, "where your growth, not your excuses, will be examined." Another nod. Slower this time. More grounded. "And you will make a public statement of accountability, not for humiliation, but to set an example for every person who believes power can substitute character." A tear slipped down Caleb's face. He didn't wipe it away. Luis Ortega stepped forward, offering something that felt almost impossible given everything that happened, a small, tired smile. "I accept the restitution," Luis said softly. "But what I really hope is that this gives you a chance to start over." Caleb's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Ortega. I don't deserve that kindness, but thank you." Maya watched him with cautious hope, like someone seeing a wounded animal finally stop running. The chief rose from his seat, and for the first time since entering, he approached his son not with authority, but with humility. "Caleb," he said gently, "we'll face this together, but from now on, you walk your own path, not mine." Caleb turned to him, and instead of collapsing into anger or excuses, he nodded, a small gesture, but monumental. Judge Judy tapped the gavel once, a subtle punctuation, not a strike. "This court believes in accountability," she said, "but it also believes in the possibility of change." Caleb's breathing steadied, his posture straightened just slightly, not reclaiming confidence, reclaiming humanity. Judy's final words carried the quiet authority of a moral lesson earned, not preached. "Power isn't inherited," she said softly. "Character is built, and you begin building yours today." The gavel fell, clean, final, resolute, and in the echo that followed, the courtroom didn't hear a punishment. They heard a beginning.